Welcome everyone to our Mayor and Town Council meeting here in Sykesville, the Townhouse. It's Monday, April 10th. It is 7:01 p.m. and I have just called the meeting to order. Let us begin by saying the Pledge of Allegiance and follow that with a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That moment of silence. Okay, I want to announce that this evening's meeting, as all of our meetings, are being streamed live to the Carroll Media Center's YouTube channel, as well as the Town of Sykesville's Facebook page, and will be available for playback. We begin with public comments, and I will turn to Joe. We have no one signed up for public comments. No one there?
I would be the one.
You would be the one. Well, I'm glad you're both here, and I'm also glad that we don't have a 3-minute public comment from either of you yet. So we'll move on to the consent agenda, which is inclusive this evening of the minutes for March 13th's meeting, and as well as the appointment of Michael Marsden to the Historic District Commission for a 3-year term expiring April 2026. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, President Carter. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm going to give it to Mark because he deserves it. So seconded by Councilman Dyer. All in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the consent agenda is approved, and welcome to the Historic District Commission, Mr. Marsden. And also welcome to town, because he's only lived here for a few months. So great, he's got a historic home on Springfield Avenue, and I'm excited to have him on the team. First item of new business is the introduction of ordinance number 2023-02, an ordinance to adopt and approve the annual budget, as well as set tax rates for the town of Sykesville, Maryland for fiscal year 2023-24. Just a quick background, I can safely assume that all members here have reviewed the supporting documentation in our budget book and capital improvement plan for 2024 to 28. And I will hand this off to Joe for all the highlights.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
So as the Mayor said, this is the introduction of our FY24 budget. We'll go through kind of our standard slides, and then of course if there are any questions during any section that we get to, please feel free to yell out at me, and we'll go through any individual line item that you ask. But first and foremost, we always start with the revenue side. So real estate taxes is of course our highest revenue category. The constant yield rate is listed at 0.3168 cents per $100 of assessed value. We are, or at least this budget has been prepared in keeping with our current tax rate, which is 0.33 cents per $100 of assessed value. So that will require us to do a public hearing and do some advertising to make sure that the public has an opportunity to speak about that. But at 0.33 cents per $100 of assessed value, the estimated revenue we expect to receive in FY24 is $1.840 million. And again, that's allocated obviously out throughout the expenses. The income tax is always the second highest revenue side, which is always difficult to predict. So what we typically do is use averages. So we look at the 5-year running average, and that's what we kind of set our budget at, knowing that the 3-year running average is a little bit higher than all of that. So again, the 5-year running average is right there at that $945,000. It's actually a little less than that, but that's pretty close. But the 3-year running average being just over $1 million. So there's still a little bit of leeway there on the income tax revenue side. Another, at least higher revenue is the highway user revenues. This is our portion of the gas tax and vehicle titling tax. This is estimated at $249,000 or almost $250,000. This is actually quite a bit higher than what we've collected in years past, and this is because of the new legislation that we're actually getting a little bit more of a chunk from that. I do want to point out that in the budget book, there was a typo, at least in the narrative part, that showed that we were supposed to collect $924,000. That was just my error. So again, the estimate is that $249,000. And then fund balances that we're at least planning on using next fiscal year. Obviously, we always set aside a little bit of the capital reserve for various projects, which we'll talk about in the expense side of things, but we are budgeting $125,000 to come out of our capital reserve. Zero from the unassigned fund balance. And the reason I actually list that there is because I did make at least an assumption in our budget and took out the downtown Sykesville connection allocation for what the next item on the agenda will be. And then also because property taxes were quite a bit higher this year, it allowed us to not have to dip into any of our unrestricted fund balance. So I'd like to point that out. And then restricted fund balance, we typically use the restricted fund balance from the gatehouse to help offset some of the salaries for the curator. We are not doing that in this budget, again, because revenues were sufficient enough to cover that. So the only thing we are using is just a little bit out of that restricted fund balance so that we can do some building upgrades. Namely, I think this is really just for the painting the front porch. It's certainly in dire need of that. And we've been doing some various improvements to several historic structures around town, and this is just a continuation of some of those efforts. So that's really most of the revenue side of things, unless there was any specific question on revenues before we dive into expenses.
Not I.
Well, I just have one quick question. What is your long-term plan for replenishing the capital reserve? And we've got it, that's what it's for, so dipping into it makes sense, but now that we've gotten out of the storm, if you want to recharge batteries, we're still pulling from the batteries. What are we gonna do to charge them up?
So the capital reserve account, really, it's based on our capital improvements plan. So as we add and subtract projects from the capital improvement plan, that reserve amount kind of fluctuates up and down. It's really the unencumbered balance that goes to recharge the capital reserve depending on which projects have been identified. So the more you have in the unencumbered balance allows us to recharge that amount from year to year.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense?
Yes.
So
Go ahead.
I had one question that I actually asked Craig and Joe earlier today in reference to what would be the delta if we did go back to the tax rate that
The constant yield rate.
the constant yield rate. And so the information that I got was that it would be about $73,000, which leads me to a new question of how much money are we actually like raising, if you will, our budget year over year in the unreserved or the unrestricted fund. Because my personal view on what we're trying to do is find balance.
Sure.
And so not necessarily raise those coffers for big improvements down the road. If we want to do a big improvement down the road, there's other ways of being able to raise that cash. And so I'm interested. I've been interested for the last couple of budget cycles. Haven't pushed anything. I know that there was a history of this, right? And there was a time where the town needed to move in this direction of having a little bit higher tax rate. I don't know if we're still in that same space with the new housing that have been put in across the street with the new Parkside development. And then we know there's going to be another, and I'll talk about this a little bit later based on the planning commission meeting that I was in, that there's going to be likely some more housing that happens over there. So where do we find the balance, and is this year the right year, or is there a future year, or when is it right to have that? And that's kind of what I'd like to just open up to different folks of when's the right time to have those sort of discussions within the council.
Yeah, really anytime that the budget comes up for discussion is the time to start having those conversations. It's part of the strategic planning process as well to say, is it, are we, I want to say you're doing too well, because anytime you start to build up that unencumbered balance, you're basically preparing yourself for if there is a downturn in the economy where you can help balance the budget without having to say lay off staff or forego some of those projects that are needed. So it's a good discussion to have. It's just there would have to be some context around kind of what specifically we're looking at as far as how much is too much, I guess. How much money is too much money to go from year to year?
And so I guess I would ask the other council members if you have a strong opinion about going back to the constant yield rate. And it would essentially reduce our intake by 73,000 and some change if we went back to it based on the analysis that you all had done earlier. And that would likely mean that we'd have to rebalance the equation based on how the numbers are projected now. And so I just don't know if there's strong opinions.
Well, that's why I raised the issue. We are, if you listen to the naysayers out in the public, in the finance industry, we're going to have a recession. That doesn't mean we are. But we do know we just got done with a unprecedented, at least in my lifetime, event that's caused a lot of upheaval. If we lower the rate and then have to raise it back up, we have to go through that motion. We have to walk around people, you're raising my taxes. If we keep it the same and I use the analogy of recharging our batteries, okay, the battle's over, the sub's on the surface, let's charge our batteries, and then we can lower the rate and not worry about, oh crap, I've got to go, I don't have what I need. I'd rather build up and then drop that rate than lower it and then raise it and lower it. I'd rather build something up so we have it for a rainy day, even though I do agree we want to lower it when we can. But that's why I'm asking, is it time? I don't think so, but is it? If it is, then great.
In all fairness, we have $1 million in our rainy day fund even after the unrestricted balance goes away, right? And so we still have that sustained $1 million, plus we have 1.3 that we would be looking to in the next budget, the next line item, look at, something I think is really a good idea. And we're getting more cash revenues in year over year where we're building our overall budget year over year. And there's, a huge amount of additional property that's within town. That's where I struggle, is like finding the balance, because it seems like by doing over the constant yield rate, we're just taking in more as a just in case. And
we are, but that's why I turn to these experts and say, what do you think we should be doing?
Yeah, well, and again, so I'll say this too. We've just started to really ramp up our efforts at the police department. We have expanded staff there. So again, all of these things, as you kind of build that into the budget, you need time to let that kind of filter out. So it's like, if you put me on the spot and said, Joe, should we reduce our tax rate? I would say no, because we're still very young in some of these processes. Public Works there's been some churn there as well, so there's constantly some turnover. And then, I don't even think we've gotten up to fully staffed at the police department. So though we are budgeting for that, we haven't actually seen it yet. So it's just like, I would almost want to wait until we had some more stability and we had everybody in place. And then if we're still, collecting more revenue than, let's say, quote unquote, we need to make sure that our batteries can be recharged every year, then we can look at, whether or not that the yield rate is something we should look at.
And I was just going to say that I see both points, and I see it more as, yes, we're putting more in reserves, but we're also taking care of things that weren't taken care of from prior years. We're finally getting around to doing the things that need to be done.
Yeah.
It's a balance.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that part of what we're trying to do. That's why I have the conflict going on. I'll stand down from the conversation. There's this work we do, it's Elmo, where you kind of take it back. But it's one of those things where I like to have the conversation, I'll probably bring it up again in the future. Thank you.
Well, in the future, I think, actually in complete agreement with you. We should lower it someday.
So I think it's a good conversation to have. I don't think now is the time to have it. I think probably September, or when we're not in the middle of planning the budget, but when we have time to think about it and really setting up what the metrics would be. Because we are coming out of an unprecedented time. We have, one of the things we haven't mentioned that I was gonna ask is just to go over for the public's sake, the ARPA stuff, because I think that's counted as revenue, not as expenses, even though, so there's I don't think we're in a predictable time right now to say what is stability for us, because of what we're coming out of, as well as because of, as you mentioned, we have housing development that we haven't planned on. So to me, if we take time when we're not in the middle of it, to say what would be the metrics, how would we know? Because I would agree with you if we can lower it, we want to, right? But we don't want to do it and then be backpedaling because it was, impulsive to do it. So I think we look at what the metrics would be from, and I don't know what they are, but with our treasurer, with our town staff of how would we know, and then put that into place. So in our strategic plan, every year that question gets asked because we have a watermark that we've predetermined, not in, a pressured time, but, that's been really thought through.
Sounds like a good strategic planning topic
I agree.
for
Yeah.
February.
I agree. Thanks, everyone.
So my request was just, can we go over the ARPA, just for the sake of the public?
We can, and we will hit on that on the expense side, because that's where all the money gets allocated to capital projects. So I'm happy to, we can run through each of those projects and what specifically is going to be paid for from the ARPA account. Okay, so then moving on to expenditures. So I'll do kind of a broad view, and then we'll get into some of the capital stuff first. So just from I guess a salary standpoint, so there is a 2% COLA that is being factored in. I know we've talked about going to more of a merit-based system. I'm still working out let's just call it the gymnastics that you have to do to make sure everybody kind of starts lining up with their anniversary dates. And everybody's used to getting that hit on July 1 instead of their anniversary day. So we want to make this year kind of the bridge year of, okay, so on July 1 you'll get a 2% bump, and then on your anniversary date you'll get the COLA, or you get the merit-based type review. And again, some of the justification for that, just so everybody's aware, typically we look at the CPI index or the CPIU index, which is for the urban areas, and it was set at around 6%. So again, if you say, okay, well, we're going to give you a COLA of 2%, but the CPIU is 6%, people are actually getting a 4% decrease in pay. So again, that's why we have a premium pay policy to help bridge a little bit of that gap, and then we did build in some additional increases on the merit side of things. So again, we are trying to make sure that people aren't losing money while working for Sykesville. And I know I mentioned the premium pay, but this FY24 would be the sunset year for that. So again, there'd be basically one more round of payments for everybody based on that policy that we adopted 2 years ago. New staffing positions, there were 2 part-time positions that were added to this year's budget. One is at the Gatehouse. This is basically the assistant curator position so that we can start expanding some of the efforts that have been going on there over the last few years, and then hope to pull in some of the historic schoolhouse pieces, and again, just more offerings for the community at large, and then one part-time person at Public Works, really just to give some relief on the splash pad maintenance. Now, there'll be some other park duties I'm sure that we can assign to this person, but I'm sure Derek wants his shoes to dry out from last year, which they probably just did. And then, let's see, health benefits rose at a more manageable level this year. It was only 4%. This is opposed to last year when we had an 11% hit. Again, that was these manageable increases are something that we kind of factor in when we do our projections. So when you see those large increases, sometimes it's a little harder. This is one of the good years where it was relatively manageable. And then again, all those other employee benefits were similar increases to the health benefit, right around that 4% area. We did have a question from the member that wasn't able to be here tonight regarding gas prices and whether or not in Public Works and the Police Department we looked at that. If you look at that individual line item, it is higher than current fiscal year, so we did kind of factor in the idea that gas prices will probably continue to rise. Hopefully not as much as they did last year. I know we were approaching $5 a gallon at some point last year. So again, that was factored into just the overall budget process. And then I know there was a question about the trash rebates as well. There is still budgeted the trash rebate for the Raincliff subdivision. This is something that we've kind of started at least internal conversations about how we could potentially handle that. We have not had detailed enough conversations with either of the HOAs, be it Parkside or Raincliff, to actually pull the trigger on that yet. But we will continue those conversations, and if it turns out that we need to start implementing those into our regular routes, I think we can do that relatively quickly because we do have a stockpile of some of the containers and everything. But we do need to get a better handle on kind of what the contracts are with those HOAs, and whether or not they're long-term or annual contracts, so that we can kind of work our way into taking over those communities.
Joe, with that, would you have to hire another staff to help with that support? Or do you think that you can handle it with what you have?
I don't think so, and Derek and I have had these conversations, at least on the surface. You know, it would add hours to the routes on certain days, but I think we're okay from a staffing standpoint. Now, we just made the comment that, you know, we had some churn at the Public Works Department, so it's just like, it would be, I think if we're down 3 guys, we have to get help. We usually have to get a subcontractor to come in and help us out. If we take over these communities and we lose 1 or 2, then we'd have to. So again, it's just kind of one of those things that we're willing to give it a try, and we think we can do it, just given what our staffing level is now. But, you know, if it turns out that it takes longer when we actually start doing the route, then we'll have to adjust on it.
So I guess with that particular item, have you had any conversations with the HOAs as of yet?
Oh, we've had a brief conversation with the Parkside folks, because they've really just established their HOA. So when we first got the names of the people that were on the HOA, we did reach out and start those conversations. We have not received a lot of feedback yet or information back from them yet to really do the deep dive that we have to do. And again, those roads still haven't been turned over to the town yet, so it's like there's still a timing issue on exactly when that's going to happen.
Okay.
Which, to be honest, is why I'm not, and Joe's not really knocking on that door with this topic until that exchange happens with the roads themselves.
Is there a timeline on that?
The turning over the road, it should be the next, everything's built out, so.
Yeah, it's built out. They have not top coated the second phase, the second half of that back there yet. Plus, there's still some. I think they're working through some issues with county inspections to make sure all the stormwater stuff is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So until they get all of those resolved, and the top coat is done on the, let's call it the back half of the Parkside, I'm sure there's going to be some minor repairs and broken curves that need to be replaced, and then they'll ask likely for the bond release.
Do the conversations need to happen at the same time with Raincliff and Parkside, or can they happen at different times?
Yeah, they don't have to happen at the same time. Again, it's a matter of, I guess, where each community is in terms of their contract with whatever provider they're using now.
And so I guess I'm asking the other council members if it'd be okay with you if we gave some direction to the town staff to engage with at least Raincliff, because that could happen sooner, but I don't know if other people are okay with that.
That's fine.
And I've had off-the-record conversations with former elected HOA officers that have agreed.
Thanks.
Or you can keep the tax rate
I know it's the flip side of the previous argument, okay? I do recognize the yin and yang.
That's good though, Jeremiah. We were all on the flip side when you were talking, and now you've joined us, so it's cool.
Welcome.
I'm not there yet. But
Okay.
So that's the, again, general discussion on the operating side. So we can move into the capital expenditures now, which, again, from years past, at least just from the capital reserve point of view, this is a relatively low year for us for what we typically spend on capital projects. One being at public safety is the EV charging station. There has been a question about whether or not this could be a grant funding project, and that's absolutely, well, I shouldn't say absolutely. It potentially can be a grant funded project. Most of the grants we've seen for these types of installs are for public charging stations, so this would be one that we want dedicated to our police officers that are using the electric vehicles and not so much open to the public use. So again, it's finding that segment of the grants that might be out there that have been a little bit difficult right now. But we wanted to make sure that we had it in our budget in case we can't find any grants for it. We want to go ahead and get that infrastructure in place at the police department, because when it was one electric vehicle, it wasn't so bad. Now that we have 2, it's, there's a little bit of a line that starts to form at the public charging stations right here next to town hall.
So, Joe, would you have the charging station somewhat attached to the police department? That way it's not encumbered the
Correct.
public?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be basically on the side of the building. In theory, next to the dumpster, kind of on the side where there's already parking spaces that we use. The next is Public Works and Sanitation, so $100,000 total, $70,000 for the new leaf vacuum and trailer. This has been something that we've been, I guess, playing around with, not necessarily incognito, because lots of people have seen us doing it, and we've gotten questions about it, but this is basically a ramp-up effort for our leaf collection program. And then we're actually, I should say, establishing our leaf collection program. And then a new quote-unquote used dump truck for $30,000. So some of you might not be aware, the truck that we attempted to get from Manchester actually got sold out of state, so we got outbid for that particular vehicle. So we're kind of back in the market for this truck. So Big Red is still, parked happily in the trailer.
Ooh, it is. Yeah, I'll put it in.
So the next items under Parks and Recreation, all of these are actually grant-funded projects. So it's the Linear Trail Parklet. This is where the Linear Trail meets Calorama Road. This is a grant that's actually in current fiscal year that we know we're not going to get finished, so we're just pulling it over into next. Same thing with the trail improvements at Cooper Park. These are for the pedestrian bridges that are through the woods at Cooper Park, is to replace both, or at least 2 of the 3 I think that are out there that need to be upgraded. And then any leftover funds from that particular project would go to finally repair the trail that's between Jennifer and Oklahoma Avenue. And then lastly, that BF Strawberry Cannery building is $50,000. This is again from the capital grant, is to kind of restart that. As I know we've talked about before, we had originally entered into a contract, or wanted to enter into a contract with the DeVos Institute with the University of Maryland. Unfortunately, that fell through, so we have not made any progress on that. This is basically just reestablishing that wall. And then, so the council priority capital expenditures, these really are the ARPA funds that we had mentioned. So really all of these projects would come out of the SLORF funding, or the state and local fiscal recovery funds. The first 2 are capital expenditure or construction expenditures. This is so that we can actually start moving dirt at the Baldwin Drive and parking lot improvements, and then how it ties into Oklahoma Avenue between Baldwin and Main, and make all of those streetscaping improvements there. That's $1.1 million worth of work that's scheduled there. I didn't mention this when we were talking about highway user revenues, but because it's Oklahoma Avenue and Baldwin Drive, if this project does come in higher than expected, we can actually allocate some of those highway user revenues to this project and offset some of those road improvements. The 714 Sandusky site, this actually include the townhouse lawn. This is that $350,000 engineering contract that we had just approved. We're obviously not going to expend all of that in current fiscal year. We're probably going to spend about $100,000 of that, so this is just a continuation of that contract. And then we'll actually be able to construct the stormwater improvements, one on Norwood Avenue and the other on Central. Any questions about capital expenditures?
So not about capital, but going back to the other expenses, the operating expenses. I noticed that for legal services, we dropped down to $36,000 for legal counsel for professional services.
Yep.
I was interested, and I saw maybe the reason why is that in prior years before this year, we were lower than that. Do we think that $36,000 will actually cover us for what we need?
Yeah, I'll admit it's a little bit of a shot in the dark, just depending on how the legal expenses go.
Okay, so if we need to do a budget change, we'll do that.
It is higher. Historically, we've scheduled, I think we've budgeted around somewhere between 20 and 25,000 every fiscal year. So 36 is higher. Whether or not that's enough, depending on what happens from a legal perspective, we'll have to cross that bridge.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
So I would just say from Parks and Rec, the improvements at Miller Cooper, greatly needed and appreciated. I've definitely heard for years about those, the unsafe bridges and things like that. So that, and then, we've heard a lot about I've heard a lot about the Main Street work and, desire for that to, the intersections that we're working on. So just glad to see that we can finally do it, and thank you for putting it in.
And specifically because people usually ask about the Main Street streetscape, and it's again because it's still a state road, it's still kind of under their control, and we're kind of at their mercy for streetscaping. So most of our funds are being allocated to the periphery, so that we can, we'll be ready when the state wants to allocate some funding for Main Street. We'll have everything nice around it.
Joe, have you come to an agreement with the state that once they complete their renovation, that they will turn over that to the town?
Well, we wouldn't want to take it until they either give us the funding for they call it urban reconstruction now instead of streetscaping, but we want them to do the streetscaping or give us funding to do the streetscaping, and then we'll take the roads over. So it's we don't want to take them over in the condition that they're in, because then we're just spending local dollars for that, where it's a state road now, they should allocate their money for it.
Yeah, they're anxious to turn over any of their state roads that have been filling the need of a local use for as long as ours has. And but yeah, I think because they're so willing and able and wanting to, we can hopefully work in some dollars for the urban.
And just for everyone's education, we have had those conversations about, hey, how do we get the funding for Main Street? And that was a program that was basically, zeroed out in the state budget for quite a while. So again, there haven't been a lot of new money that's been allocated to those urban reconstruction projects. However, there's a new administration and there's a new secretary, and we got an MML meeting coming up, and that'll certainly be on the agenda to talk about.
There's a whole design plan out there.
Yep.
We had meetings.
Yep.
and
Concept is
drafts
there.
and-
Yep.
So you hate to see those efforts go to waste.
Yeah.
Again, they're still sitting out there. I'm sure they need a tweak or two
I'm
just
sure
to bring
too.
them up to a standard.
But again, that's a point of leverage as far as this money's been invested, and it's just not being used. The outcomes are not being used.
Something I didn't mention, because it's really not a capital expenditure, but it is in the operating side of things for the, talking about Millwood Cooper Park and the improvements over there, is that there is money set aside on building maintenance in parks, or one of those line items, so that we can upgrade the bathrooms so that we don't have to winterize them every year. So again, having those open year round is definitely on the schedule for this year. And then finally, it's really just an overview of the reserve accounts, and it's almost regurgitation of what you're going to probably see in the treasurer's report, but just to go over the fund balances. The receivables are really just non-spendable things, or things that we've already paid for and just haven't received the benefit for yet, or loans that we've given out, which are really just the ADA improvements there at Sykesville Station, which I think this is the last year for that. So that's a number that kind of fluctuates from month to month, just depending on what we've already paid for. The restricted fund is, a majority of it really has to do with Warfield and the escrow amounts and the note payable that's still outstanding. The gatehouse fund is in there, and I want to say there's a little over $160,000 remaining in that endowment that we had received. The assigned fund is really our entire capital reserve, repaving reserve, impact fees, our parking impact fees that we've collected are all assigned and in there, and available for use for at least those specific purposes. And then the stabilization reserve that's our in case of emergency break open glass fund, and then the unrestricted fund balance, which is basically the savings account for the council, so that money can be allocated as you see fit. So that's really the nuts and bolts of the proposed budget for FY24. I will note that this is on the website. It's live. I know there was a link that was shared in the newsletter that went out. You click on it, it will take you right to the budget book that everybody received. So it is open and available to the public. And if there are any other questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them. Otherwise, we're recommending the approval of the introduction of the budget and to set the public hearing for May. So we'll have a meeting in between before we actually adopt it.
So, and I think you addressed all of Councilmember Grassley's. I think you hit on all of them. I didn't have them written down, but it felt like you did. I know that was something that we all agreed we'd all want to hear about. I think you did touch on all of them with respect to the budget. And I have a note here that you just touched on, Joe, so we're good. Is there anyone else that has any questions or concerns or requests for clarification from staff about the budget?
No.
Okay, cool. So with none being heard, do we have a motion to approve the introduction of ordinance 2023-02 as presented and set the public hearing date for May 8th, 2023?
So moved.
Thank you, Council President Carter.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Schofield. All in favor of the motion on the table, unless we have need for further debate. I don't believe we have, because this is one of those special ones. Okay, so all in favor of the motion on the table to approve the introduction of ordinance number 2023-02 as presented and set the public hearing date for May 8th, 2023, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
I think that's everyone. Anyone opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Okay, that motion is approved.
Just one other comment. Very nice job, Craig and Joe, on putting it together, and Mayor, for your input to the process. It's a very time-consuming journey to set sort of an agenda for the town. Nice job doing it.
Thank you. And thank you to the staff too. The heavyweight is, I come in the middle and the end.
Yes, no, yes, no, yes.
Yes. And maybe, and no, definitely not. Okay, that moves us to the next item, number 4 on our agenda. Resolution number 2023-03, a resolution establishing parameters of a one-time annual contribution advance to the downtown Sykesville connection for the purpose of purchasing a building. This item summary includes just a couple sentences I'd like to share. The downtown Sykesville connection is looking to purchase a property here on our own Main Street. They are requesting the town contribute the purchase cost as an advance on the town's normal annual allocation to that organization. I'll let Joe go from here.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it in a nutshell. So again, on an annual basis, the town budgets, at least for the last several years, $50,000 donation to the downtown Sykesville connection that goes to offset some of their operating expenses. Obviously, I think their budget's much bigger than that, but that's our contribution to it. They have expressed interest in a property, or actually have a contract on a property here in town. And in order for them, they've looked into getting a loan for this property, but because they are such a new 501c3, they don't have the ability to get, let's just call it favorable loan parameters for whatever loan. It would be definitely in the double digits, and that kind of defeats the purpose of what their real reason for being downtown is, if they're paying it all to interest on a loan for this building. So they reached out to staff and council about potentially advancing money that we would normally allocate on a yearly basis over the course of the next 10 years so that they can cover the expenses of purchasing the building. In exchange, we would keep all of the benefits that we currently get from the DSC, from all the events they do, and the sponsorship notifications the sponsorship credit that we get for all of their events. And we would eliminate the annual contribution from our operating budget, and in turn would cut them a check for $500,000 out of our unencumbered balance. There were questions about, well, if a nonprofit owns the building, is the town also losing potential property tax revenue? The DSC has agreed to pay a nominal amount, which basically equates to what we currently earn on a money market account, and at 1.5% on an annual basis to offset the loss in property tax. Plus, if there were something that happened over the next 10 years where the DSC would cease to exist, or they decide they want to sell the building or not own the building anymore, the building would then actually revert to the town. So we would actually set up a deed of trust situation where it's like it would come back to us in exchange for this advance in funding. So it's really before council tonight is whether or not we're comfortable, donating from the unencumbered amount, that $500,000. Right now we do have $1.5 million in the unencumbered account. That does not take into account what we have currently budgeted in this fiscal year to come out of that, which is roughly $150,000 or so. So again, I guess the operating amount in the unencumbered fund is roughly $1.3 million. So it would reduce that down roughly by a third. But I guess the offset of that would be, we do end every fiscal year to the positive. So again, we would be replenishing that money. It certainly wouldn't take us 10 years to replenish that, depending on obviously tax rates. I think we'd make up that difference relatively quickly. This isn't going to necessarily put the town in a position, at least that we can foresee, where we'd be in a bad spot in any kind of moment. It's just a matter of, are we comfortable with advancing these funds to the DSC as opposed to giving that annual contribution on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm.
It is assuming that we're given the annual contribution over the next 10 years, but again, there hasn't been anything that seems to be that we would eliminate that for any reason. So we are making the recommendation, or staff is making the recommendation that we move forward with this and approve the resolution to advance them that $500,000. We've already taken that money, or we've already eliminated that line item from the proposed budget. And we would also work with the DSC to make any necessary modifications to the existing memorandum of understanding between the town and the DSC to I guess factor in the fact that we've just given this advance.
Joe, I have a question. When this was first discussed, it was at 450? Was that
Yes.
increased because of negotiations with that property?
Yes. So again, it was originally going to be a 9-year advance at 450, and again, the $500,000 really is the contract sale price. I mean, that's it's all going straight to the building. It's not money that's going to the purchase and then potentially renovation of the building. That's all on the DSC.
I had 2 questions. In the staff report, we talk about that legal had some recommendations to incorporate into some documentation
The deed of trust.
into the deed, and so that has not been done yet.
It is not. So closing, I think, is scheduled for, I want to say, the 17th of April. So we would make sure that those recommendations are built into the deed of trust that gets approved at closing.
Okay. And is the legal concerns addressed, at least in part, in the ordinance? What the legal recommendations are?
In the resolution?
I'm sorry, in the resolution?
Yes. So, I mean, those were the protections that legal wanted.
Where they essentially would give us the property if they didn't.
Right. They wanted to make sure that as part of the advance, if there was anything that happened to the DSC, that we would actually be the beneficiary of the building.
Okay. And then the second one was, I see the 1.5% interest rate. I wasn't sure what it's on, right? Is it 500,000 the whole time? Is it 500, then 450, then 400, then, like, is there any thought about how that process would work?
Yeah, we build it basically like a regular amortization schedule.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone over here on my right?
Nope.
I know we had a very lengthy conversation about this in prior closed session, so I think we're all comfortable. I just want to reiterate that this money being taken from the unencumbered will literally have not any touch, and this is mostly for the public's edification, not those of us here at the table, but it won't affect our capital reserve, the stabilization reserve, or the repaving reserve. So it's kept separate in different pots. So that having been said, is there a motion to approve the resolution number 2023-03, a resolution establishing the parameters of a one-time annual contribution advance to the downtown Sykesville connection for the purpose of a building purchase as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-03 as presented.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Council President. That's a first and a second. Before I call for a vote,
Just one other discussional topic, and it's more just a comment. I just want to say thank you to Councilman Keenan for your leadership in this space, and we're continuing to work with the DSC to figure out creative solutions. I think it's going to be a big add to the town, and it's going to be able to connect them even better with the community. I also think it's going to do a nice job in terms of revitalization to a certain part of the downtown, so just want to say thank you.
Thanks, and a huge thanks to Joe too for his, quick action whenever we've had questions or needed help. So thank you.
Very good. It's good teamwork. I'm thrilled about it as well. Is there anything else before I call for a vote? Okay. All in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that brings us to
One quick comment, just because I said I'd do it, is Councilman Grassley, who couldn't be here tonight, did send an email to everybody that expressed his support of this resolution as well. So again, we just wanted to make sure that was public and on the record that we weren't doing this just because he wasn't here.
Excellent. Excellent. I should have done that too, because I also told him that I would make sure everybody knew that. So thank you, Joe, for throwing that in right before the vote, or before the gavel anyway. So unanimously, one through email and 6 here at the table, we approve the resolution number 2023-03. Great.
And Joe, you mentioned settlement is in a week. It's
Yes.
the 17th.
Yes.
Okay, well, congratulations, DCS.
Big deal, DSC. Here we go. So we got announcements and reports. The next meeting is Monday, April 24, 2023. Spring cleanup, our bulk trash pickup day is this Saturday, April 15th. Please place all of your bulk trash pickup items at the curb the night before, so they can all be picked through and taken by the people who want them, which is nothing wrong with that. And then whatever's left over in the morning, our trusty DPW employees will pick those up for us and get those out of your way. And that being said, I planned for the very same day, this Saturday, April 15th, a Fill the Truck event in coordination with Habitat for Humanity's Restore of Carroll County. Again, April 15th, this Saturday, but from 9 to 1, you must bring your donations to the location of the Restore truck, which will be at the Little Sykes Railroad parking lot. They will be there from 9 to 1. Last year we had donations set out at the curb as well as the bulk trash pickup items. I cannot stress enough, do not do that this year. Bring them, please, to the truck. We want to fill it up before they head back to Westminster, to the store. And if in case anyone has a large item like a couch or a working washing machine that they'd like to donate and they don't have the means by which to carry that or transport that item to the truck up at Little Sykes Railroad, please call Restore. All that information is in the newsletter that should have fallen in all of your mailboxes this past week. But please call Restore Manager Carol Ferns. I'll read her number here, but you can just look up Restore, Google it, and you'll find this number. It's 410-751-5200. Her extension is 8. And she said I could read her cell phone number over the airwaves here, so I'll do that too. It's 443-278-6167. And again, that's to set up pickup of an item that is too large for you to bring in your own vehicle to the restore truck this weekend. And let's keep those items out of the landfill and put them to good use. We have volunteer opportunities available at the Historic District Commission and the Police Auxiliary. If you're interested in these or any of our volunteer opportunities, please email the town at town@sykesville.net for more information. I'd like to announce that Election Day is once again May 2nd. And our staff updates are beginning this evening with Joe. And I can't imagine he has anything else to say.
I do have something.
Excellent.
So, yeah. Real quick, I just want to say thank you to all of our volunteers on Spark, Impact Church, staff who participated in the Easter egg hunt this past Friday. I know the Police Auxiliary was there. Jeff did a great job as normal. Again, we had a lot of volunteers show up, and again, it's just one of those community events that everybody really gets a charge out of. And we were able to unveil the new Easter Bunny, which didn't frighten any children. So again, very good upgrade. And just to remind everybody that the scavenger hunt is still ongoing along the linear trail, so you have until tomorrow to get the secret word submitted and potentially a door prize. And then the only other thing, just a very brief update on the water and sewer work that's been going on. So most of the work on the south end of town, they'll still have to go back at some point and finish up down there, but they've moved on to now right in front of, almost in front of the townhouse building, where there was a section of water line that they actually have to dig up and out and replace. So it's creating quite a stir out there, but hopefully, this week they'll be there and they'll knock that out, and at least that portion will be done.
Weather's going to be good, so.
Yeah. It's honestly just the winter that we did not have really helped out. So again, they're still looking at a June completion date for Main Street. Let's just say late June, just to make sure there's not any issues.
As long as they're out before the parade.
Right, that's kind of the target. It's the July 4th parade. Springfield Avenue will not be done by the July 4th parade, but that's kind of expected. So they're still plugging along up there. I know I said this, I think in the written update that I sent to everybody, but they were able to get a better, let's call it rock crushing machine to get through some of the rock they've been running into. So they have started to make a little bit better progress. There was a design change or a conflict that had been discovered very early on in the project with some of the stormwater issues at the south end of Springfield Avenue that I think they've been able to finally figure out and work around. So again, now that that's in place, they can really start really just focusing on the work that needs to be done rather than what needs to be done. The state has let out to bid their stormwater project, which is, I think it's a middle of May due date with a target notice to proceed on construction in July. So there's going to be some overlap with the state stormwater work and the water and sewer work that's going to continue on Springfield, which to me is, might as well try to get it all done as quickly as possible. So once they have a contractor in place, once they have a contractor in place and they start working, we'll have a better idea of exactly how long those improvements are going to take. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that, by September, everything's done. But in all likelihood, the stormwater work will still be going on. But the state work that they're going to be doing along Springfield will tie into what we plan on doing on Central Avenue. And that is one of the things that once they have an identified low bidder, we can then negotiate with them, since it'll be a state bid project and a state contractor. We can then have them bid out what we want to do on Central, and all that can be done at the same time rather than two separate projects.
Yeah.
That is all I have there.
Thank you. That brings us to the treasurer's report. Mr. Craig, I'd appreciate it if you could provide that for us.
Can I just ask one more question about the work on Main? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Does paving's not included in done by June, right?
It is not.
Because we still have to do stormwater, and so paving, do you have any sense of when paving would happen?
I don't. There's still a question of whether or not the state wants to come in and do the paving on Main Street before Springfield is done, or just wait and do it all at the same time. I can say that the patching will be a lot better than what's out there right now. It's not like you're going to have steel plates everywhere.
Couldn't be worse.
Well, it could be. But I will work to get clarification exactly what the state plans are on that. I don't know if there's an overlay built into the budget, or if they were just going to let the state come in and do it after the fact, or if there is like a light overlay just to clean it up before the state comes in and does like a more significant repaving project.
And where the question's coming from is just a concerned citizen for the festivals.
Yep.
That'll happen later this summer, obviously, and so, yeah.
Chief has expressed his concerns about
The steel plates.
the steel plates and things outside too. So it's like,
I have, thank you.
Thanks, Craig, sorry.
No, that's fine. Good evening, everybody. I'm sure more numbers is what you want to look at right now after all the other numbers have been inundated at you. At this time, I'd like to present the March Treasury's report. We're now 3/4 of the way done, fiscal year 23. She put down, usually she has the balance sheet up there. Quick note, I usually don't kind of start off with that, but I just want to note on the balance sheet, I've reconciled all the bank accounts, so I'm sure if you don't have the report in front of you, it's okay, but 7.4 million in cash and checking and CDs is definitely an accurate balance right now, if anyone was thinking about that, given the impending transaction that we discussed a little sooner, that obviously we're very liquid and there won't be any issues in getting the money together for that situation. So at the 9-month mark, we are still ahead of budget by $345K, which is pretty steady for us. Expense-wise, nothing really occurred that was any like material surprise. Obviously, we made the Raincliff trash rebate that we've discussed a little bit earlier, as well as we donated the monies to the Sykesville Freedom District Fire Department for the $10,000. Everything else is pretty kind of non-consequential at this, for this month and for this time period. So honestly, I really didn't have too much more to discuss tonight. I was trying to give you a break, knowing we were doing the budget and then certain other things we were going to have to go over. But certainly, if you have any questions at this point.
How much is the fire department donating?
10,000.
10,000. That's ties back to your first comments. I remember years ago, we're penny pinching the budget, and it was down to $1,000, the
Really?
contribution. And then one year, we actually cut it out.
Oh,
Because
wow.
we didn't have the money for it, and now we do, and now it's gone from 1,000 to 10,000, which
Yeah,
is.
fiscal year '21, it was 4,500, and then we
Excellent.
jumped to
That's-
10 this
I'm really glad to
previous.
hear
And then we,
Yes, this is the second year for 10.
yeah, it's back
So
in.
do they expect
10.
more
that.
or?
No, they're just happy to have anything.
Okay.
And we also pick up their trash as part of that.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. It's good to know.
Okay, any other questions for our treasurer, Craig? No? All right, thank you, Craig.
All right,
Oh, I
thank
did
you,
have one,
guys.
but I did want to, it's a quick one. You said you paid for an advertisement in the Baltimore Sun. You mean the Carroll County Times, which is owned by the Sun?
Correct. That is 100% correct.
The check goes to the Baltimore Sun.
Right, Baltimore Sun Media or
Yeah.
something like that.
I figured that was it,
Some
but I just,
Ohio.
Yeah.
it looked weird, and now I just want to be sure. Thank you.
Yes,
Frank Thompson paid, right? Correct?
yes,
Yes, okay, thank you.
good question.
All right, all right,
All right, thank you.
thank you. Well, this brings us to our public safety report. Chief Spalding, please. Thank you.
So hard to follow the fashion trendsetter.
If you'd like, I could reverse these on the agenda every 2 weeks if you'd like. I mean, if it hurts that bad.
I was
Based
gonna,
on his appearance.
Yeah, well, I mean,
gonna ask to borrow Councilman Dyer's glasses because of the shine on his shoes, but, police shine right there.
Yeah.
Got me beat. All right, enough with that. The public safety report is actually a large one, covers almost a month, period March 6th through April 2nd. As you can see, we handled quite a few events during that time, 929 to be exact. Some of the highlights are 22 assist other agency, 22 community policing events, which thank you, Councilman Schofield, for your kind remarks and for that increase. 35 foot patrols, 454 patrol checks, 55 traffic enforcement initiatives, again, 929 events. And included with that would be 21 incident reports, which was quite a lot for that period as well. So it's been a busy time for us. Any questions about any of the events or any of the incident reports?
Before Councilman Schofield makes a comment, I'm gonna say it on his behalf as well as mine. Thank you for the increase in public, community outreach.
Welcome. You know, the officers, to put it quite simply, they get it. They get the balance between being proactive and enforcement. And one in particular in the back who has joined us, and I told him not to come because I didn't want to be embarrassed to talk about him with him sitting here, but he's one of the new generation of officers that we have that simply get it, and they're doing a phenomenal job, and we're fortunate to have them.
So I actually got to speak with a child today. Parents were right there, so nothing weird. And they were talking about the community policing. The child was, about how much they appreciate how the police drive through their part of the neighborhood and how you give out little trinkets and toys and whatever. And that's a kid talking, right? That's pretty cool.
yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you.
So I have a question on the catalytic converter. So I had seen an increase in that just in general in Facebook, but hadn't seen any.
That's the
seen
first
it
one.
down and saw it in town, so it was.
It's the first one we had, and the minute it went out, I believe Officer Jacobs is the one that handled it. I said, "Oh no," because they're happening very frequently outside of the town and in the area and all over the country. To be honest with you. In fact, Officer Jacobs was telling me about Montgomery County. It's such an issue there that they now have a program. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a program where they're allowing people to come in and have their catalytic converters spray painted and etched with a serial number to prevent theft.
So
Is
yeah,
that
that
right?
was my question, kind of what can we do in town or what can citizens do to?
Nothing.
Well, I mean, from our perspective, to increase our vigilance, and it's particularly during the night, and that's when these things are commonly, removed. In terms of what people can do, really not a whole lot. I mean, unless they park their car in a garage or have security cameras.
So are they prying open the hoods
No, it's all done from underneath.
Yeah.
A Sawzall,
From underneath?
Sawzall in 5 minutes and it's off. Yeah.
So they're jacking the car up so you can get
They
under.
do have to jack the car up in
It's
most
big
cases.
and they're small and they can get up under and they just
Wow.
sawzall.
You're right.
So why just
We should
one?
stop
Was this
talking
something
about
special about this vehicle?
It's hard to say, they may have planned more than one, or I'd like to think maybe they were scared away by a patrol check by one of our officers and didn't come back, but it's hard to say. But thankfully only one, but in my mind, one's one too many.
One more question that you might not want to answer for a good reason. So I'll just plant doubt in anyone who's listening mind who has ill intent. I know that in a vehicle, we learned that in Detroit, and vehicles don't have just the VIN numbers on the dash. Sometimes they're hidden in various parts.
Multiple locations.
They wouldn't have.
Is there one on a catalytic converter?
No.
No?
There's a part number, but not a serial number. Yeah.
Not like it should be.
It's because it's part of the muffler system. I'm sorry to get a little technical, and they
Right.
get replaced a lot because they rust out.
Mhm.
It's so difficult to order it by then.
Why don't we all take our cars down to Old Town, have them spray them chartreuse,
Yeah.
and that'll be like the color that if somebody steals one, that one came from Sykesville. What do you think?
What's chartreuse?
That's like a really bright green yellow.
Oh.
Yeah.
okay.
Or maybe peach colored? Huh?
Or peach.
Technically salmon.
Oh, well,
Thank you, Derek.
For a guy who's partially colorblind, I was gonna say salmon, but I thought I was wrong. Okay. Thank you.
Salmon and peach.
something we're certainly aware of, we'll certainly keep tabs on. One of our new criminal section supervisor, Sergeant Lacey, is certainly be something that he's going to monitor very closely and work with other agencies to see if there's patterns.
I was gonna say, so I mean, you're saying this one might have been disrupted because there was more than,
Just
are
guessing.
there usually more than one when?
They get as many as they can, yeah.
So there's usually a team or something?
I've seen working individually and maybe two.
It's very fast if you know how to do it, and then
Oh, it's very good.
there are some vehicles that the catalytic converter is higher value in. The older Acuras, which this one was, happens to be one of those. I would tell you I was surprised because another very commonly stolen one is Toyota Tacomas, and there were 3 Toyota Tacomas within that same general area, so I actually went over there to look at them when I went for that report because I was assuming that they would also be removed, but I did not see any evidence that any other vehicles had been tampered with.
Well, that goes to my question. Do we have a list of like, this is 1, 2, and 3? You know, on the other hand, you got a Yugo, nobody cares.
There's probably a nationally publicized list.
There
Yeah.
are lists available as to which ones are more expensive,
Yeah.
and also which ones are easier to access.
Sure,
So you support what I'm saying is if I find it on the web, you basically think that's accurate.
probably.
Thank you.
Yeah. If it's from a reputable source, sure. It's probably safe to assume there's one person doing the cutting and probably a lookout. So I would ask that any residents that see any suspicious activity, particularly at night around their vehicles, to call 911. And our officers will be dispatched, and maybe we'll get lucky and catch somebody in the act.
So it is more evening.
Oh,
Kind
yeah.
of-
I would assume by cover of darkness is, as you know, when most crimes occur. I don't think they'd be so brazen to do it in broad daylight, but
Parking
Possible.
garages, they do.
I was gonna say,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, well, Montgomery County, I was aware of some that were happening during the day, but I just wasn't sure the timing for this so I think any information that we can get out to the public, because I think it is a big issue and it's definitely I've seen the rise, at least online, of reports,
absolutely.
outside of town, so.
It's just a matter of time.
Easier,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the other question I had was, we had another request for one of our female officers. So I think we were gonna keep tabs of that.
We are.
Is it becoming a problem or is it?
It hasn't become a problem yet. We like to extend assistance to other agencies that support us, and we do when we can. There may be times when we say, no, we can't. If it's too far, or we only have one officer working, or the officer's going to be away from town for an extended period of time. But so far, we have monitored it, and it hasn't become an issue.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
Well, I did want to point out, just real briefly, a lot of good police work in these 21 incident reports. One of which I want to point out was Officer Jacobs. Again, this started with a traffic stop. If you have your incident reports in front of you, it was 00045. A traffic stop for speeding. Turns out the plate was also expired, so that's what we call probable cause in order to make a traffic stop. And it turned into a tremendous amount of criminal activity. Let's see, there was, I think this is the one with crack cocaine, pipes, fentanyl, which as you know is killing people every single day, powder cocaine, paraphernalia, and stolen clothing from Kohl's to boot. So this was, and I believe 2 warrants, or 1 warrant? 3 warrants. Three. So this just was a whole plethora of criminal activity that all originated from an astute officer conducting speed enforcement and making a stop. So it's something we call the total traffic stop. It's not just about pulling someone over and writing a citation or a warning and letting them go. It's knowing what to look for, asking the questions that are important, using your senses, your experience and training. And in this case, Officer Jacobs did an excellent job.
So there could be morons with an expired tag.
You know, we'll take the easy ones we can get in. Another case very similar to this was actually Officer Picardo. Again, probable cause was fail to dim your high beams. So remember, that is a violation of motor vehicle law. He failed to dim your high beams. Officer Picardo made a stop. 2 adults from Western Maryland, Thurmont and Kemar. One subject ended up being wanted in Pennsylvania, and this resulted in over 30 pills of suspected heroin, 22 used syringes within the vehicle, 50 unused syringes within the vehicle, crack pipes, Narcan. It's good that they had Narcan available. I think actually one of the state troopers, you weren't aware of this case, well, you helped with it. One of the state troopers transported one of the subjects, the male subject, for us, and actually had to use Narcan on the way to the hospital. So again, good police work, just based on a simple traffic stop for a minor traffic offense, resulted in very good arrest and taking dangerous substances off our roadways within our town. So excellent work. I mean, there's other cases here, but just all around good work by our officers.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, anyone else? All set. Thank you so much. That brings us to council committee reports. Anyone here at the table? I know you had mentioned you had something for us, Councilman Schofield, from the Planning Commission. Why don't we start with you?
All right, so there were 2 topics on the last agenda. One, both were concept plan for different properties. One was 7452 Springfield Ave, or what we often think of as the Dunright facility. The basis of the discussion was egress in and out of that building, and they've changed around some of the parking there. They're actually going to be supplying more parking than what is required by our zoning, and the Planning Commission was, we didn't have to actually approve anything on that particular matter, but it moved forward. The person that's the developer was concerned about having to buy a very expensive, I'm forgetting exactly what. A transformer that they had to buy, and they wanted to make sure that wherever they placed it, they didn't have to change any locations downstream with any of the other plans. The second plan is what's called the Enclave at Parkside, and the Planning Commission did need to approve this concept plan and voted unanimously to do so. And what happened was, so you'll probably recall that the developers for Parkside came before us and asked us about zoning changes last summer. And so now they've issued a concept plan within those zoning provisions. And I just want to make sure that you're situationally aware and the public situationally aware that they are planning to build out 47 townhomes in that space directly adjacent to where Parkside is now, to, I believe it's to the west. And so if you look at that right now, it's a huge hillside. And what they're intending to do is essentially top off the hill, grade that out, and then provide all of the amenities that are necessary in order to meet what our zoning is in that space, including having future availability for possible commercial and retail space as well. So one of the reasons that we approved the concept plan, although there was some discussion about that initially, is that it met what our zoning requirements were as we navigate forward. So as we're thinking about other possible developments within the community, I just want to make sure that we're all situationally aware that there is a plan currently moving forward with 47 additional townhomes coming in. And of course, they're going to have to go through all the normal processes for site planning and getting approvals, and they'll have to come before us again and all of that. So that's all going to happen. All the public hearings that need to will happen. If I get any of this wrong, I'm sure you'll correct me. But all of that, is sort of what happens next. It's very possible that they could be coming forward with their site plan as soon as a month or 2 months. It could happen in the next planning commission meeting. And they're working with the same architectural firm that worked on the Warfield property, so they're very aware of what our town processes are, and they're aware of the PEC zoning requirements in that space. So again, I just want to make sure that you're situationally aware, and if you have a chance to look at that planning commission meeting, I would highly encourage it.
Jim, I have a question,
Yeah.
Councilman Schofield. You mentioned the architectural component to the discussion. Was there any mention of aesthetics as far as them being in keeping with the strict and stringent guidelines we have over at Warfield for those?
Yeah, so the book that we have, the pattern book that we have, they already have that book readily available because of the other property, is my understanding, based on the conversation. And so I believe that will be submitted as part of their site plan as we navigate forward. And what they said is that the townhomes are going to be a little bit bigger, so a little bit wider. I think they're going to be 24 feet wide. Is that right? Yeah. And so with that, and I think the ones that are there now are 20 and 22, just to kind of give you some perspective. And they're going to use a very similar, if not the same, pattern book, but we haven't seen that as of yet, and so too early to tell. There's 2 points currently of egress into the enclave. One would be, so both are new roads that would go in. One would have to be, one is sort of, if you drive back there, going in, and I'm forgetting what the
Town Park Drive.
Town Park, that's it. So you go on Town Park Drive, you go all the way to the end of it, you'll see like an end. Well, that's going to be one of the roads in, and then there's a new road that they're going to be putting in based on their concept plan that they have. And again, we'll see all this as it comes forward to all of us as we navigate forward.
Thank you.
I'll add on just one point of clarification, that the timing of it's definitely not going to be ready for the next planning commission meeting. Matter of fact, it's probably going to be several before they actually get back in front of planning commission. Because it's a preliminary plan submittal, they'll have to go through at least a round of comments through the county review process before it actually makes its way back. Somewhere in between there, before the planning commission actually issues an approval for a preliminary plan, assuming we get that far, is the adequate facilities piece will have to come back before council for approval. And again, once they make their submission for that preliminary plan, we'll start working on the adequate facilities piece. And again, that'll be scheduled in front of council whenever it's time to make that decision.
And just for the public to understand what that means is that we look at things like water availability, school availability, traffic availability, and on and on. There's other things that we look at there as well.
Police, public works,
Yeah.
all of that.
Okay.
Sorry, I was
It's making the notes.
thinking about something else. I apologize.
It's okay.
You work-
It's
you
another
work hard.
community to watch over, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that thorough report, Councilman Schofield. Anything from Council President Carter? You guys didn't meet since our last meeting, huh? Okay.
Mayor.
We do have a
Oh, I'm so sorry. I
It's
couldn't
okay.
see. We were making
I
eye
couldn't see it.
contact.
Oh, no, I'm not making eye contact with anyone tonight, thanks to my dilation. Couple things, real quick. If anyone has an issue that relates to our cable connections here globally, not just your own home, there is a meeting of the Carroll County Cable Regulatory Commission this week. If you have an issue that affects many people, let me know. And I thought I'd at least start the ball rolling on our technology. We're training. We're trying to get together with Magic in Westminster, the Mid-Atlantic, I was going to say it right, Gigabit Innovation Collaboratory. I always have trouble with that word. I've approached them, and I've approached the continuing education and training people at Carroll Community College to try to invite people into the townhouse to have a session on overcoming fear of technologies, navigating the web safely, securing and privacy and other such things. And we'd hope to do it here, and I've got that ball rolling. Hopefully we could do something about that in, say, July. If we get enough people to do it, I'm looking out at the crowd, if anybody's watching, we can do it here, and you won't have, if you're a senior citizen, you won't have to drive all the way to Westminster. Everyone would be welcome, but we're focusing more on those who are afraid of technology or just don't know how to use it. Anyway, if you're interested in that kind of thing, let me know. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. I appreciate you moving that ball. It's important. I'm looking at you, Councilwoman Guroff.
So I have updates from Spark.
Okay.
So we have our summer cinema series coming up, and we already have a couple community partners who are sponsors. So anyone listening, we do have sponsors for the movies. Bronze, silver, gold, and then our special holiday movie, which is Ghostbusters this year. So for Halloween. So we have June 10th is Space Jam. July 8th is Christmas in July, the Muppet Christmas Carol. August 12th is Encanto. And September 9th is The Mighty Ducks. And then October 14th, the special Halloween movie is Ghostbusters.
Which version of Space Jam?
Space Jam, 1996.
The original.
The best one.
Yeah, Jimmy Tackle Drug.
Classic.
And the 1984 Ghostbusters.
As it should be.
So, yeah, so exciting stuff over the summer in the park. There'll also be music in the park and some other fun things that we're planning kind of for inaugural. I don't know if...
Skate park.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we...
They're in the process of planning the first skate event at the skate park.
So,
How about that?
yeah.
In partnership with Shrimptown Skate Shop.
Very cool.
Yeah, so very exciting details to come on that.
Hey, I like it.
Yeah. It's, it's all good stuff.
Very exciting.
All exciting stuff. And then, so sorry I was gone the last two meetings, but I don't even know. One of them was discuss the Leadership Maryland, and kind of my request if there's any support that I can get from the town. I know there were some questions, so I can share information. I'm not sure what people would be interested in. Personally, across Leadership Maryland, Leadership Carroll, there's one in Carroll County. These are actual national programs as well. Other states have them both by county and by the state. Definitely something I think all of us should look into because it broadens both our connections and our knowledge, whether it's within the county, which I think would behoove us to have some people from the council involved in that program. And on the state one, it expands our knowledge of resources and kind of what's going on across the state. So I do have, like, even our first 2 days, the first homework I have is reading up on the legislative process. And so we're going to be doing a lot of work in understanding that process as well as kind of where our roles in that are and where we can start to impact it. As well as leadership styles and just building our own leadership styles, but more of the focus after that is really around getting to know what resources we have in our state and then what we can do to bring them into our own locations or jurisdictions. So the class itself is divided into thirds almost. 1/3 are actual public entities, people from state governments, county governments, local governments, in a variety of different spaces in that area. 1/3 is private, and 1/3 is actually our nonprofit community across the state. And so some of the things that I know we're already gearing up for, we will be touring a nuclear power plant. We will be learning about, so it's, it's kind of a variety of different things about economy. A big discussion we have actually at our orientation is around understanding the economy and the GDP, and then how it starts at that higher level and really then gets down to our granular level in terms of impact. So, and then understand, like I said, on the first one, it's the legislative process. But we'll be touring across the state in different regions, and really learning not only kind of what's special in that region that we might be able to bring back to ours, but also making connections for us to access different resources that might help within our areas. So I don't know what people have heard about the programs or have been involved in, but we definitely have a variety in this classroom and all of them of, like I said, public, private, and nonprofit. So overall, in general, if people haven't heard of the programs, definitely would encourage everyone here to explore them. And then there's a lot of cost. A lot of this is I will be covering on my own because I think it's important. But had asked the town just on the, so there's a, I don't know what it's called, admission, it's not admission, it's whatever, to participate in the program. A what?
Tuition.
Tuition, which I have been able to secure some scholarships and some other support. And then there's all of the travel, which I'll be covering on my own as well. So I'm putting most of my own money in to do. I was just asking the town. Good. Do you think there is a benefit back? For some support in that. That's what I can tell you. Kind of. I don't know what the questions were, what people would be interested
I think it
in
was just a general. Well, maybe not so general, but at least at the front end, it was a general understanding that we were lacking of the program itself, and then the benefits that to you are one thing, but then what are then the benefits from Councilwoman Guroff to the town and the council specifically, or the community. And so, having a better understanding of what the actual program is intended to accomplish for its future graduates from the program, the alum, as you have been referring to them, I think, in previous conversations with me, to be an alumni of the Leadership Maryland program, is bare bones. I think the only time I've ever heard anything about it is just now. So I'm not sure if there are specific questions other than, as I mentioned, the general concern of the council that there would be a comprehensible benefit to the town by virtue of your participating and completing this very lofty goal of yours. And I know it's several months, if not.
Yeah, it's till October. So it starts in 2 weeks in April. We each month or every other month or something, we're in a different region. So
Okay.
I know I'm actually going, when we're in southern Maryland, I know a portion of it's at the Tucson River. And yeah, it's kind of going around the regions. I can give you guys as much as you'd like in terms of the resources, but it really, Leadership Maryland and Leadership Carroll are about building our leaders in our community, and making sure we have the resources and knowledge to be good leaders in our fields.
If I can ask,
In the state.
what drew you to the Leadership Maryland instead of the Leadership Carroll?
So for me, it was in my full-time position. I'm also in a position that does statewide work, and so in looking at what the two offered, I felt like the Maryland one gave me a better perspective, not just of what we're doing in the state. Actually, some members of my organization have participated in the health department pretty regularly in Leadership Carroll, so I felt like I had some access to that information. This was a broader, and felt like both on the council position and then my other work, I felt like it, being on the task force representing small communities, on the Trauma Informed Care Commission and hearing it just felt like it was a better perspective for me, from all that we're going through.
I know that I would benefit from maybe it's something that's not possible for you until you've actually gone through the program, to know what the connections would be and what the what you're learning here would translate specifically to programmatic things here in town, or services, legislation, such and so on. So I would love to see something where you were to list what your agenda is for the program, and then be able to say, this is what I would be looking at from the perspective of being on the council, with respect to that each an individual item on the syllabus, if you will. If there is one or two that do that, then those would be the two I would focus on with that information.
Yeah, that I'm going to get at the end. I have already spoken to some mayors, and a mayor that had been on it and felt very strongly about the program. But yeah, I can bring the syllabuses back afterwards.
Okay.
For sure. But okay.
So I guess I had a couple of thoughts as well. So one of them is just more broadly, is training something that we want to support for the people on the council? And so that's a more broad question. And so I had anticipated that we might talk about this, and I noticed for the 24 budget, the training and education has a cap of about 5,000, and I'm presuming that this is mostly for town staff. The training and education on 5810 for the budget.
It is.
And then I looked at the Maryland Municipal League dues and scholarship, and I know I've certainly taken a number of their courses at the different conferences, and so maybe that's the way that we typically get educated. That's the way that I understand that we do. And like, what's the difference in between what happens for Maryland Municipal League and what you gain from that experience versus where they do teach you? I find some of the skills to be somewhat rudimentary, leadership-related skills in the different courses and whatnot. But then there's some things that are in there about budget and the legislative process that are not, that are very geared towards municipal leaders and whatnot. And then there's opportunities for you to volunteer to get on other committees where you're going to learn a lot more about it. So, for example, the experience I had on the legislative committee for 2 years was very, very valuable in terms of understanding legislative process. And so where I struggle is seeing sort of what's the benefit of this versus what we already have, and we're paying about $6,400 for, and that's not just the training, it's all the stuff that goes with it, the dues, the chapter dinners, and all of that stuff, so it's more inclusive. So maybe even broader than what you're saying, Stacy, what would be helpful for me is to be able to see, okay, here's the pros and cons. It's really like comparing the two to each other to see what's there. And I would be very open to a broader conversation about some limited funding for just all of us to engage in some sort of continuing education. I'm not sure if I want to make it a requirement or not a requirement. And some of us, so for example, the last week of April, I have to go do my own continuing education stuff for stuff I do at work, so I'll be gone that whole week. Unfortunately, they're funding it, but it's like some of us have to go through that anyway based on what we're doing day to day. So it's again, those are where I am on the topic. It's the two. I'm not sure if we're ready to engage in that sort of discussion, but we need to fund it. And so I'm bringing it up because we haven't talked about it, and we're working on our budget right now. So now's a good time. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the cost of Leadership Carroll, and so I think, even just that would be, in addition to what MML offers, the more we understand our community and how to access resources we might not be aware of, I think the better off we help our citizens. So I would agree with if we can look at something to support council members across the board.
Well, and I think it could be even more broad than just something that's focused in on,
A particular program.
yeah, like it could be, some sort of a stipend or, like, I'm just making stuff up right now, so, but like some sort of a stipend of $500 or $1,000 or something pretty small. In comparison with what our salary is, that's actually pretty big.
I was gonna say that.
And so it's one of the, maybe it's too big. I'm just throwing. It might be again. I'm spitballing. So, but it's one of these things where, if you had that, then you could use it to do some sort of a listing of approved whatevers in order to further your whatever you're trying to do in terms of. While you're here, it's like I'd be open to that sort of a discussion. I'm not sure if others would be.
Education is definitely important because you can never learn enough. But for clarification, you applied because it's an application and you have to be selected. You applied on behalf of your full-time position.
I applied on both. So I was recognized. We did introductions. I was actually recognized for both.
But when your application, did you submit it through?
I personally submitted it and wrote it, and they ask you what you do, and why you feel it's important, and why you're looking at the statewide one. And I in my process I identified both as beneficial,
Okay.
both for my current position and for the town. So yeah, for me I saw it as and that's why I approached the town. I see it as something that will grow me in both of those ways. So.
I think that because we don't have it budgeted and we're taking funds, and funds are taxpayers' dollars, I needed to find out, or I do need to find out, what resources that you're gonna learn about are you gonna be able to bring into town that's gonna be useful for us?
Mm-hmm.
That was the general, I think, concern for everyone. So I do think it's worthy of a future conversation regarding education and stipends equal to 1/6 of our.
It was spitballing.
I know. I just love.
Maybe it's less. Maybe it's nothing. I don't know.
No, I understand. Just teasing. So okay, well, thank you for taking the time to do that.
Absolutely.
And like I said, if you want to delve in further with something, in writing, to kind of bridge the gap between what Council President Carter and I have said, I think that would be helpful, advantageous, not just specifically in this situation, but moving forward for how we would maybe want to structure something for a education thing across the board.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just briefly from
Yes.
TSC, a new business has joined the Sykesville family. It's called Baldwin's Dreams, 7550 Main Street, number 2. They have their grand opening this Saturday, the 15th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. with prizes, food, and 10% off the entire weekend. They are a craft, basically. They do wood-turned items, fabric and sew crafts, painted vinyl records, frames, bowls, and other unique upcycled sustainable art. And the other thing is we do have our Art and Wine Festival coming up on Saturday, May 6th, 12 to 4. Tickets are available, as are volunteer opportunities. We definitely need more volunteers.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right. So it sounds like
The what?
Hot dog
dogs.
hot dogs.
Yes, yes.
You guys tell me about that.
We have hot dogs opening up on Main Street
Oh,
Yes,
this week, I think.
yes.
I did not get that memo.
Think of
Yeah.
this tomorrow.
I didn't either. The
Okay.
mayor missed that memo too.
7556,
Six.
the bistro.
The bistro, the second half, is opening up as a hot dog, specialty hot dog, grab and go.
Wow.
Sign permit is pending.
Okay. All right. Then.
I have to check that out.
Good stuff.
Premature.
Well, the sign might not be up, but the hot dogs will be there.
So April 15th sounds like a busy day between Baldwin's Dream grand opening and the bulk pickup and our Restore the Truck, Fill the Truck event. There's also this Saturday, the 15th, beginning at 10:30, the Gatehouse Museum curator will be leading the linear trail walk, a path through time. And all those interested in joining us, because I will be there, we'll be meeting at the basketball courts on Calorama. So we'll take a walk through time on the linear trail. I'm looking forward to it. The only other thing I'd like to announce is that last week we were awarded our 2022 Green Award in recognition of the town's enthusiasm and hard work in planting and caring for trees. The award is administered by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources in combination with the Maryland Association of Forest Conservancy Districts and the Maryland Urban Forestry Committee. Our award was a result of our passage of our tree ordinance earlier in 2022 and our volunteer engagement in tree planting events, as well as our official designation as Tree City USA. So we'll be putting more information together. We're going to be celebrating those things on Arbor Day, so we'll talk more about that later. Arbor Day is the 28th. And I promised the Springfield Hospital Center that I would announce that they are having a tree planting event on the Friday, the 20th. Is that a Friday? 21st, thank you. Of course, because Arbor Day is the following Friday, the 28th. So Springfield Hospital Center at the Patterson House. If hopefully those that aren't aware of what the Patterson House is will just Google that, and they should go just because it's the Patterson House and it's really cool. But they are going to be having a tree planting event to celebrate in advance of Arbor Day. And that's all I've got. I guess that brings us to an opportunity to adjourn this meeting, if anybody would like to do that.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I would ask for a vote. All in favor to adjourn the meeting? Aye. None opposed. Here we go. We're closed. It is 8:37. Have a wonderful week, everybody.
You too.
Thank you.